What's up YouTube, Dow here from Zephyr War Games. I hope you all had a very Merry Christmas. Today I am bringing you a different type of Dark Magician video, and this day I am bringing you a learning to play deck breakdown 101 of Dark Magician. Now what I mean by this is I'm taking my favourite deck of Dark Magician and I'm going to break it down for every single one of you at home and basically go through the different variations that it can have, the core cards that should be in all the different profiles, while particular people play certain cards over others, and pretty much answer the most requested questions regarding a Dark Magician deck so that you can take this information and put together one that works for you. Now, there are loads of profiles up on the channel, and I do so many different variations for Dark Magician because I am always evolving, I am always testing, and I'm always finding different angles to play with Dark Magicians. I mean, just over the past year of 2020, we've looked at Dark Magician Dogmatica, we've looked at Dark Magician Synchro, we've looked at Dark Magician Phantom Knight Extender, we've looked at Normal Extender, we've also looked at Dark Magician Numeron. There are so many different ways that you can use and abuse Dark Magician just to keep it relevant, keep it fresh, and keep it incredibly important, as I like to see. So with that out of the way, please smash that like button, hit the notification bell and subscribe. Get this video up to at least 50 likes and it will unlock more Dark Magician profiles. I'm looking to do a joint video updating Dogmaticas and of course Numerons, because the way they work is they're just an engines that you can swap out of the deck. With that out of the way, ladies and gentlemen, let me take you through today's deck breakdown and deck 101 of Dark Magician. Now, I've seen a lot of profiles floating around that only play 2 Dark Magician. To me, that is not a Dark Magician deck. A Dark Magician deck has to. This is like the #1 rule for a Dark Magician deck, and it has to contain 3 Dark Magicians. Now, of course, it is a Dark Magician deck. Dark Magician is your core card. Now, don't get mistaken, this is not a profile. This is me just breaking the deck down. So Dark Magician is your core card. He is your ace monster. He is your core component. He is the thing that keeps the deck ticking. You then play a card called Magician's Rod. Now, this is the only normal summon monster without a tribute that you play. Now, the reason you play Rod, and the only reason that you play Rod and not play stuff like Robe and everything like that, is because he is your searcher. He is the Stratos. He is the gears that keep everything turning. So, with Magician's Rod, you can search out any spell or trap that lists Dark Magician in its name. Now, the first spell that you are going to go for, if you don't already have it in your hand, and I'll explain the exact reasons why you go for this particular spell above everything else, is of course going to be Dark Magical Circle. Now, the reason you go for Dark Magical Circle, which in my opinion is the most important spell card in the Dark Magician deck, coming first just above Soul Servant, and that is purely because Dark Magical Circle is on activation. You get to look at the top 3 cards of your deck and add a card that lists Dark Magician, or a spell and trap that lists Dark Magician in its name, except, even including in itself, or you add Dark Magician. So basically you're allowed to stack your deck legally, and this then comes into account later on down the line. On top of that, when a Dark Magician, or if is the correct terms, if a Dark Magician is summoned to the board, you get to target 1 card on the field and banish it. So the idea is that at any point when a Dark Magician hits the board, as long as it stays on the board and doesn't get removed by Twin Twister, MST, anything like that, you are able to target and banish 1 card your opponent controls. So not only is it another form of search, in a sense, it is also another form of stacking your deck to help you out for your next turns and your future draws, but it also provides a form of disruption. Second, we use Soul Servant. Now, the reason I would say Soul Servant is second to Dark Magical Circle is the pure factor that, yes, Soul Servant can put any card that lists Dark Magician in its name to the top of its deck. But Circle can then instigate further game, which is why Circle, being that disruption of the banish, being the fact that it could, in turn, search you out a Soul Servant if this is on the top of the deck, puts this above anything else. So in my personal playstyle, in my personal opinion, your normal summon of Rod, the first thing you go to is Circle. If you already have Circle, you then go to Servant. The only time you would ever go Servant instead of Circle is if you have the ability to draw into a circle. So what I'm saying by that is you would go Rod, search out Soul Servant, activate Soul Servant, put Circle to the top of the deck. I would then need to have an Allure of Darkness in my hand or some other form of draw spell to guarantee that I'm going to get the Circle. That is the only time I would do it that way round. The other alternative way you can do it is you activate Dark Magical Circle, you chain Soul Servant to guarantee a card going on the top of your deck is going to be one that Dark Magical Circle can reveal and add to your hand. Whether that be Dark Magician, Eternal Soul, Dark Magician's Navigation, or anything else like Illusion Magic or Dark Magic Inheritance is incredibly important. Now, at this particular moment in time, what I will address, because we are specifically talking about this card here, is the difference between a card that says the Dark Magician and a Dark Magician monster. That is why you cannot search out Eye of Timaeus off of the back of Magician's Rod. You can't add it with Dark Magical Circle, and you can't stack it with Soul Servant. It's this very, very fine detail that all of these cards refer to Dark Magician himself. The Dark Magician. There is only one Dark Magician, and it is this guy right here. Whereas Eye of Timaeus refers to a Dark Magician monster, meaning that it can be used for Dark Magician Girl as well, which is why you cannot search it and why you cannot stack it to the top of your deck with Dark Magical Circle or Soul Servant. I know it can be a little bit confusing. It is terribly frustrating, trust me, but that is the way of the wording, and that is the big difference. When it says the, referring to the single aspect of Dark Magician, and a, referring to multiples that contain the name of Dark Magician, that is the fine difference as to why you cannot add. Now, the other spells that I tend to play in my particular deck is Illusion Magic, specifically on the Numeron build, because you want to clear off what you do. And this card lets you tribute a spellcaster monster and add up to 2 copies of Dark Magician from your deck or graveyard to your hand. This is a very good point to mention that Dark Magician's Rod's second effect, that if you activate a spell card during your opponent's turn, while this card is in the graveyard, you can tribute a spellcaster to add this back to your hand. Now, the cost is quite high in the sense you have to tribute a spellcaster, so I'd only advise doing it if that spellcaster is about to leave the board through an opponent's effect, or if you don't already have Rod in the hand. It is a nice way of regaining your resource so that during the main phase, during your next turn, you've got a normal summon the Rod and you can start the chain all over again. Then, of course, we've got the Dark Magic Inheritance. Again, keep in mind, we've got a continuous on Circle, and then we've got quick plays on Inheritance, Soul Servant, and Illusion Magic. So Dark Magic Inheritance, you target 2 spell cards, or you banish 2 spell cards in your graveyard, and you get to add 1 spell or trap from your deck that again specifically lists the card Dark Magician or Dark Magician Girl in its text, except itself. So again, this is another way that if you're playing a deck that puts a lot of spells into the graveyard, you've got another consistent version that if you were to not get into a circle, not to get into a servant or anything like that, this can then instigate getting into those pieces that you might be missing, or go into Eternal Soul or Navigation for your more offensive and interruptive pieces during your opponent's turn. So that's it for the monsters and spells, but we'll also lead into the traps that Magician's Rod can search. Now again, 9 out of 10, you'd probably want to go Circle first, Soul Servant second, and then Eternal Soul as your third. Now the reason Eternal Soul is so good is it's a continuous trap card that during either player's turn, once per turn, you can revive a Dark Magician from your graveyard or from your hand. Now, the reason this is further down the pecking order is the best way that this can be used and abused is if you have Dark Magical Circle. Because by having Dark Magical Circle, it means that during your turn or your opponent's turn, you will always have the ability to bring back a Dark Magician to trigger Dark Magical Circle to banish a card your opponent controls. This is probably the strongest trap card Dark Magicians have, but it is one of the strongest Dark Magician cards we have, in the sense that every Dark Magician monster in your monster zone is unaffected by your opponent's card effects. If this face-up card leaves the field, destroy all monsters you control. That is its biggest weakness. This is the biggest target to your opponent. The second you put this on the board, your opponent is going to target this with Phoenix, Unicorn, MST, not Unicorn, that's something I'll mention in a minute. So MST, Twin Twister, Cosmic Cyclone, Unicorn, Phoenix. Now, one very important thing to remember about this, if this gets unicorned or Castell, it will not destroy your board because cards cannot activate in the main deck. This can only trigger to destroy your board if it goes to the graveyard, to the hand, or to the banish zone. If this goes back into your deck, it cannot trigger to blow up your board, which is a massive misplay by your opponent if they do not know. So keep that in mind. If they do try to Nightmare Unicorn this, you can go absolutely fine. This goes back into the deck, everything survives. Now this card actually got incredibly stronger when we got Verte Anaconda, or more so Red Eyes of Dragoon, because it cannot be destroyed by either player's card effects, meaning even if this goes, in the previous point where this would go back to your deck, you would lose your entire board, you can now actually survive leaving a Dragoons on the board, which is an insanely powerful boss monster for your opponent to deal with. And we'll get to Dragoon when we get to the extra deck. The final trap card that I play in the deck is, of course, Magician's Navigation. Now, this has become less relevant in particular styles of the Dark Magician deck, purely because its usefulness during your opponent's turn is a little bit hindered, because it can get ashed, and it's a very, very big negative if it gets ashed. What you want to be doing with this card is actually putting it in your graveyard for its secondary effect. So, you get to special summon one Dark Magician from your hand, then special summon one level 7 or lower Dark Spellcaster type monster from your deck. If you control Dark Magician, except the turn this card is sent to the graveyard, you can banish this card from the graveyard and target one face-up spell or trap your opponent controls. It has its effects negated until the end of the turn. So this is another way that if this is in the graveyard, it can protect Eternal Soul from being destroyed. But you can kind of see that the requirements to get a Dark Magician to your hand, and then if you can't get a Dark Magician out of your hand, is quite damaging. Especially when you're playing Red Ice Fusion, you're putting your Dark Magician to the graveyard quite consistently. This is why Navigation falls further down the pecking order. That's it for pretty much the main spells and traps that are searchable off the circle, that all come off of Magician's Rod as well, and how you can kind of utilise them in the deck, and the way they kind of synergise together. Moving on to the other cards that you put in your Dark Magician deck, we'll start off with the most expensive one itself, and that is, of course, Magician's Souls. Now, this card came out in the Legendary Collection 6, I believe it was, and it is due for a reprint in Legendary Collection 3, but that will not be coming until at least the middle of 2021. For now, the reason this is so good is it allows you to send a level 6 or higher spellcaster monster from your deck to the graveyard, meaning you can put a Dark Magician in the graveyard to set up Eternal Soul plays. Also, you can send a Dark Magician Girl, or a Oracle Mahard, or a Oracle Mana. Now, by setting those up, you set yourself up for your Soul Servant, because something I didn't mention with the Soul Servant is you can banish this from the graveyard and you draw cards equal to the number of Dark Magician Girl, Oracle Mana, and Oracle Mahards in your graveyard or on the field. Now, obviously, you don't want to play all 4 of those, because the sad situation in the sense is, in my opinion, Dark Magician Girl, Oracle Palladium, Mahard, and sometimes Mana can be a bit of a brick. Now, I'll explain each of those as we go through the rest of the monsters and explain why they can kind of hinder your plays and why not a lot of people play them, but I'll also explain why you do play them. So Magician's Souls can do that. Magician's Souls can then revive a Dark Magician Girl or Dark Magician that has been sent to the graveyard through its effect. So you activate the effect in hand, you send from deck to graveyard as cost. You can then choose to revive the Dark Magician or the Dark Magician Girl, or you get to special summon out Magician's Souls. Now, the reason you would special summon out Magician's Souls is if you have any dead spells or traps, or, in this example here, you don't have a Dark Magician to the hand, but you do have a Magician's Navigation. What Souls can do is they can send Magician's Navigation to the graveyard, and it will allow you to draw cards equal to the number of spells or traps you've sent with its effect. Again, you can only send up to 2, so you want to be very, very careful, and you do not want to send Eternal Soul, because then you would lose your board, including Magician's Souls. But it is just another nice draw engine that helps you extend your plays, and because it does list Dark Magician in its text, it can be stacked to the top of your deck with Soul Servant. Now, let's speak about the other monsters. Now, the other monsters I don't tend to play in most of my highly competitive Dark Magician decks, purely for the fact that they can slow you down. So we look at cards like Dark Magician Girl, Oracle Mana, Oracle Mana and Oracle Mahard. Now, Mahard is a level 7 spellcaster that if you draw it, you are able to special summon it. Its attack is 2,500 and it goes up to 5,000 if it battles a dark monster. If it is destroyed, you then get to special summon a Dark Magician from the deck. Now, the issue, I think it's hand, deck or graveyard. Now, the issue with that particular card is the general fact that you have to draw it. If you open it up in your opening hand, it won't trigger because it does not count as being specifically drawn. It actually counts as just being in your opening hand. That is the issue there. Now, a lot of people say that Soul Servant can put it back to the top of the deck, which is absolutely fine, and then you can draw it. However, there's not a lot of dominating dark monsters around for its first effect to become effective. The draw effect is just so risky that when you're trying to play fully competitively against the main decks that are floating around right now, you need to minimize your bricks as best as you possibly can. We then come down to the, not battle, but the comparisons between Oracle Mana and, of course, Dark Magician Girl that are basically the alternative options of each other. Now, Dark Magician Girl, again, in my opinion, unless you're playing Dark Magic combination, and like the Dark Magic Attack and Bond between teacher and student, there is no real need to be playing that card. Yes, you do get the effect off that if your Dark Magician's fusion monster is destroyed, you will then be able to special summon a Dark Magician and Dark Magician Girl. But please keep this in mind. The reason that I think this is not as great for that particular effect is it relies on your opponent. If your opponent is smart enough, they have enough cards that can spin this back, that can stop its effect, that will make sure that the Dark Magician and the Dark Magician Girl never come back to the board through the effect of the Dark Magicians. Which again leads me to that whole point of you're adding an additional brick for no real additional gain whatsoever. The one light at the end of this, between the two of the Dark Magician Girl and Oracle Mana, is the pure fact that with Souls, and the fact if you're playing Verte Anaconda or Red Eyes Fusion into Red Eyes, you can actually set your Soul Servant to draw you 2 cards, which is very, very good if you go for a stun version of the deck, looking at stuff like Gozans, Rivalries, anything like that. The reason that is so good is you send your mana to the graveyard. Now, I personally would play mana over Dark Magician Girl purely for the fact that I use Soul Servant's effect, Magician Soul's effect. I send Oracle Mana to the graveyard as cost. I then summon my Magician Souls. If my opponent wants to imperm this, or wants to imperm my normal summon of my Magician's Rod, I can then bring back my mana, and that will then give me additional extensions for the rest of the turn to allow me to continue playing. Whereas Dark Magician Girl doesn't really do that. Once she's in the grave, she is a brick. And that's kind of why I would value mana over Dark Magician Girl, depending on the type of build that you're playing. Like I said, to make the Dark Magician Girl worth it in the deck, I would honestly say play combinations, play Bond between teacher and student, and play Dark Burning Magic or Dark Magic Attack, purely on the fact that putting those all together work really, really well. Now, there are other cards I haven't mentioned, purely because I don't put them in my competitive builds, and that is something like Dark Magic Attack, so which destroys all of your opponent's back row, Thousand Knives, which lets you target one once your opponent tries and destroy it. Again, the issue with the current state of the game is a lot of back row doesn't mind being destroyed. The fact that it's not a quick play doesn't give you that advantage that you might need during your opponent's turn. The biggest bonus that you get for Dark Magic Attack is the fact you can search it, and after that point, you're better off with cards like Cosmic Cyclone because they are quick plays and they actually banish cards rather than destroying cards. If Dark Magic Attack was banishing all back row, it would have been broken, and absolutely love it. The rest of the deck pretty much comes down to personal preference. I mean, a couple of little techs that I like to play is the True Name, purely because you have the ability to stack your deck with Circle and with Soul Servant. This becomes a free extender and a free draw, because all you need to do is call one of the cards that you have specifically stacked to the top of your deck. You get to add that card to your hand, and then you have the ability to special summon a Divine Beast from your deck, which can of course be Slifer if you want to keep it Yugi themed, or the strongest one in my opinion would then be Obelisk. Bringing out Obelisk to the board allows you to link climb higher, and that is pretty much the only reason you would play the True Name and play an Obelisk in the deck. For the draw cards, you've got Allure of Darkness. Now, I personally really don't like this card because you never really want to banish your Dark Magicians. But in a format where everything is moving so fast, Allure of Darkness is one of your secondary best draw cards, purely for the fact that you will have extra rods, you will have extra souls, you will have maybe an extra Dark Magician that you can banish to allow you to extend your board further forward. If you did play the extended version, or the version of Dark Magician where you do play a lot of extenders like Jester Conflict and stuff like that, then of course they will become additional dark fodder for you to banish off of your Allure of Darkness. You can play Pot of Desires because you do play a lot of free-offs, but even then it is a little bit risky because if you lose all your Dark Magicians, as it is your core card, your deck pretty much falls apart. Then we played the last 2 bricks in this, and of course you've got your Red Eyes Fusion and your Red Eyes Dragon. This is purely for the Dragoon, Verte Anaconda into Dragoon plays, and I'll go through the extra deck in a second for you as well. So, of course, Red Eyes Fusion, you ideally want to just be sending this from deck to the graveyard with Verte Anaconda, sending a Dark Magician, sending a Red Eyes to bring out your Red Eyes Dark Dragoon, and that is one of your most powerful boss monsters right now that any Dark Magician player should have. Now, they do have a quick play fusion spell for Dark Magicians, and again, it's searchable off of Rod. It's just a little bit slow in my opinion because you still need the materials to make. What you'd be better off with is something like Magical Eyes Fusion because you can use your graveyard as well, which allows you to get a second Red Eyes of Dark Dragoon. Now, we'll start off with the fusions first, and then I'll go over the Link monsters. So, the main fusions in the Dark Magician deck that a lot of people will play, or possibly play, will, of course, start off with the Dark Magicians, of course. Now, this one does require Dark Magician or Dark Magician Girl plus a Spellcaster monster. So, it is quite specific. But when a spell or trap is activated, you get to draw one card. And if it is a spell or trap, you then get to set it and you can activate it that turn. Now, that effect to me is insane, beautiful, absolutely love it. And that is why I would always play or try to play one the Dark Magicians. My only issue or my argument is when there's a lot of players that are saying, oh, I play this card because the Dark Magician Girl to summon from deck. Now, or summon from graveyard. That's why I play Dark Magician Girl. Now, I highly disagree with that if you're trying to be as competitive as you possibly can, purely on the fact that you're not always... Like I said at the start, it relies on your opponent way too heavily. Any card in this current format that relies on your opponent to do something is not going to be beneficial for you because as long as your opponent can read the cards, they're not going to fall into that trap. They're not going to do exactly what you want because by then giving you a free Dark Magician, if you haven't already used Dark Magical Circle, will then trigger a banish effect. If you do play combination, then again, that is my argument for making this more of a core point. The other fusion monsters we've got, or the second most important one in my opinion, is Dark Magician the Dragon Knight. Now this gets even more important depending on the type of version that you are playing. If you're playing a version with a lot of back row stuff like Gozen, stuff like Dogmatical Punishment that you want to protect, then Dark Magician the Dragon Knight is your second best option. Now I'm going to bring out the third option so we can talk about all of them together. But Red Eyes Dark Dragoon is the best one, in my opinion, hands down. The reason this is the best one is because it has the ability to discard any card to negate an effect. Something that Dark Magician was lacking was you want to be able to set your board up so that you can protect your Eternal Soul. If your Eternal Soul goes, you still have Red Eyes of Dark Dragoon. You still have ability to protect Circle so that you can guarantee to get that banish effect off. Then you get another negation and destroy. You get a 4k monster, which again in the past, Dark Magician really struggled to get past 3k attacking monsters. And then on top of that, during your next turn, or even during the same turn, you summon it as long as you're going second, you can non-target destroy 2 cards or 2 monsters your opponent controls and burn your opponent for their attack boost. So it instigates OTK plays. It is your out and out power play. This is, in my opinion, the first fusion you will go for. 10 out of 10, like not even 9 out of 10. There is no time that I'd be playing the game of Yugioh with a Dark Magician deck and go, right, I'm going to go for this or this over this. There's no way. Now, it does require Dark Magician plus either Red Eyes Black Dragon or a Dragon Monster, which is very important when we get to the Link monsters in a second. The reason that the Dark Magician and the Dragon Knight would become secondary, in my opinion, over the Dark Magicians is if I want to protect my back row. Now, what makes this card so good is it is treated as Dark Magician on the field and in the graveyard, meaning that it can trigger Dark Magical Circle and it can be revived from Eternal Soul. It means that your cards cannot be destroyed. So, while this on the field or... your opponent cannot target your spell and traps you control with card effects, and they can't be destroyed by your opponent's card effects. So there are a couple of cards that will non-target removal, and that's a bit of an issue, but this just gives you another nice wall. It is a 3k monster as well, so it does provide you with a bit more of a beta as well, to give you a bit of additional protection. So that is why, in my opinion, I would always go for Red Eyes Dark Dragoon, and then down to this depends on whether I want to be drawing my cards or whether I want to be protecting my back row. So that's my personal opinion on the fusions. You do have others that you can play around with, and if you wanted to go full-on fusion Dark Magician, playing Eye of Timaeus, playing everything else, then you would play Dark Paladin, and if you did play Dark Magician Girl, you can play Dark Magician Girl the Dragon Knight. Now, the idea behind these is with Eye of Timaeus, you only need a Dark Magician or a Dark Magician Girl, and the Eye of Timaeus substitutes itself as the second component, which is why you can play Dark Paladin, you can play Dark Cavalry as well, and you can play Dark Magician the Dragon Knight. As long as you have those targets on the board already of being Dark Magician or Dark Magician Girl, you can then turn them into these. But again, my first target is always going to be Dragoon, and then you're going to filter down the list. So that's it for the fusions. We'll have a look at the XYZs quickly now as well. So Dark Magician is a rank 7 deck. Now, the reason I don't tend to rely on the rank 7s anymore is because Dragoons and Links have kind of taken the position. They're actually stronger than they need to be. But if you were to ever play any of the XYZs, you'd be looking at a Bon Illusion Magician, a Bon High Magician, Red Eyes Flare, and number 11 Big Eye. Now, Bon Illusion was, to me, always a staple in the deck, but it kind of drifted away as the game sped up. Now, the reason that makes a Bon Illusion so good is it's 2 level 7 monsters, and you get to detach a material to special summon a Dark Magician from your deck. That's the issue, is the Dark Magician has to come from your deck. If it could come from grave, absolutely fine. And then when a normal, I believe it's a normal spellcaster, once per turn, detach one material from this card, special summon one spellcaster normal monster from your hand or deck. When a spellcaster type normal monster declares an attack, you can target one card your opponent controls and banish it. Again, the issue of it being targeting, but it is a way of removing a card for free if it wants to be destroyed. Ibon High was a card that never really got used, but it basically allowed you to have the ability to activate the traps from your hand, and it did have the ability that if it was destroyed, it would special summon a Dark Magician for you. But it was always overshadowed by Red Eyes Flare and Big Eye, purely because of the fact that Big Eye would just steal a card, and Red Eyes Flare was always that one where, in the past, Dark Magician really struggled to get 8k damage on board. It could consistently, with this in Eternal Soul, get like 7-5 on board. So then you'd have to make a Red Eyes Flare just so that your opponent couldn't activate anything, because then if they did, they would then burn for 500. Now, the XYZs have pretty much become second to the deck now, and doesn't really get used and abused as much because of the space, and you're ideally looking at going for your Link monsters and then your Fusion monsters, and then the XYZs fill in the last bits of space, should you choose to. Now we'll look at the Link monsters. Now, I won't go over the generic ones like IP Masquerade or anything like that, but I'll go over pretty much the new ones that can be used and abused to the highest level. So we'll work our way down. We'll start off with Selene. Now, the reason Selene is so important in this deck is purely because it is a Link free that can revive any spellcaster as long as you have 3 spells either active on the field or in the graveyard, which is very, very easy in Dark Magician when you're looking at Circles, you're looking at Soul Servants, you're looking at the True Names, Allure of Darknesses, anything like that. She can then revive you a Dark Magician. You will then have that ability from that point on to turn your Dark Magician into anything like a Link Spider, an Umduct, and make your way into an Access Code Talker, an Appaloosa, or of course go into like a Crusadia Avramax. For the Link 2, of course, we've got Verte Anaconda. Now, I've already talked about the importance of this card. Whether you're playing Magical Eyes Fusion, Red Eyes Fusion, as long as you, or even Polymerization, to be totally honest, you can then send it from the deck to the graveyard to Fusion summon one of your Dark Magician monsters, and obviously, Red Eyes Fusion is a little bit better because it could use the deck, but with Magical Eyes Fusion, you can also use the graveyard as well. So if you were to, for example, Red Eyes Fusion hardcast and bring out Dark Magician, the Dragoon, you can then, during your next turn, make Verte. Verte can then send Magical Eyes Fusion, and that will then banish the Red Eyes and Dark Magician in the graveyard to make a second Dragoon, should you want to. Now onto the Link 1s. Now this is where it gets really important because these are the ones you're going to be using 9 times out of 10. So we'll start off with the first one, the Artemis, the Magistus Moon Maiden. This is a little bit more specific. It is brand new, came out in Genesis Impact, but it's more specific relating towards the Dogmatica engine, because what this allows you to do is it allows you to turn any level 4 or lower spellcaster, so mainly Rod, into a Link monster, which can then instigate Dogmatica Ecclesia to special summon itself because you've got a monster special summon from the extra deck on the board. Obviously, the only issue from that point on is Maximus requires one in the graveyard, so you do still need to set up your graveyard with a monster from the extra deck if you plan to go that route. But the chances are you'll probably go Ecclesia to search you out Punishment or Philidius. Then the big debate between Link Spider and Umduct the World Chalice Guard Dragon. Now, I know a lot of people don't know why people play Umduct, and they tend to go for Link Spider. I was one of you guys. I used to be, Link Spider was my guy. It was the one I would always use. Now, the reason you play both of these is pretty much for the exact same reason, but some have other bonuses than the other. So Link Spider, the reason you would play Link Spider and Umduct is the pure fact that if you bring back Dark Magician with Eternal Soul during your opponent's turn, during your turn, you can link off that Dark Magician into a Link Spider or an Umduct, and then activate Eternal Soul again, bringing back the Dark Magician to trigger a Dark Magical Circle to banish a card. So that is your number one reason that you play these cards. The secondary reason that you would play each of these cards, the reason that people prefer to play Umduct over Link Spider because of space in their extra deck, is the pure fact that Umduct is a dragon. So, should you turn Dark Magician into Umduct and then get Dark Magician in your hand, get the Quick Play Fusion spell, get Magical Eyes Fusion, anything like that, If this is in the graveyard, you can then summon out your Red Eyes Dark Dragoon. So it gives you another route to get into Dragoon, which is why it ups the consistent factor. Plus, his effect isn't too bad if your opponent is a little bit lazy with their zone placement. Now, the reason people choose to play Link Spider over Umduct is for the general threat of Nibiru. Now, Nibiru does require you to make 5 summons. In this game right now, you should not be making 5 summons in Dark Magician without having a Dragoon on the board. It's very, very difficult, unless you're playing the Phantom Knight version where you are pretty much planning to send out extenders after extenders after extenders. There's no reason you should ever hit 5 summons in your Dark Magician deck. So you should never worry about Nibiru, which is why a lot of people think that Umduct is a lot more consistent than Link Spider. However, I do fully understand that if you do get Nibiru'd, you do want to be able to turn that token into Link Spider, get another effect monster on the board, make Verte, make Dragoon, and that then gives you more plays. It gives you a failsafe. But what I'm trying to say to you guys is you shouldn't need this. If you are running into 5 summons with Dark Magician, you're playing it a very, very aggressive route. So it then comes down to personal preference. This should fit into 9 out of 10 Dark Magician decks. This should fit into the last one. If you have space for both, by all means put both, but you should never really get Nibiru in a Dark Magician deck. That's my personal opinion, purely on the fact that you should never really be breaking 5 summons in a Dark Magician deck unless you're going heavy, heavy extenders. And that, ladies and gentlemen, I know is a very, very long video, but I wanted to explain each and every single card that is used and abused in Dark Magician. Now, if you do have any questions and there are any cards that you're like, well, why didn't you talk about this one? Why didn't you talk about this one? What happened to this one? Or any questions like that, then please put them in the comments down below. I'll be more than happy to answer them for you. We've got an Instagram, we've got a Facebook, and we've got the YouTube channel. So if you do have any questions whatsoever, please let me know and I'll be more than happy to answer them when I get a chance to as well. I hope you found this video helpful. For whether you are a veteran Dark Magician player, whether you are a newcomer to Dark Magician, anything like that, I hope it's kind of explained why people play certain ratios the way that you do, why people play certain play styles the way that they do as well. There are other cards like Apprentice Illusion. Again, you'll probably be playing Apprentice Illusion at 1, maybe 2, depending on your play style. Now, I haven't really gone over the cards that come down to play style, personal preference, like your Numerons, your Dogmaticas, your Shadows, anything like that, purely because that comes down to play style and play preference. The cards that I have gone over, in my opinion, are the staple cards that should be in your deck, regardless of what version you are playing, if you have access to them. And like I said, if you're playing a more heavy fusion based, I would advise playing fusion deployment. If you're playing a more heavy control based, then I would start advising you that you play more back row protection. If you are playing a Dogmatica version, then I would advise you to play more of a varied extra deck, including the Shadows, the entities, and everything like that. But for now, guys, like I said, if I have missed anything out, if there are any questions, please put them in the comments down below. I'll be more than happy to answer them for you. But for now, please smash that like button, hit that notification bell, and subscribe. Get this video up to at least 50 likes, and I will bring to you an updated profile for Dark Magicians. And heck, I would even be happy to go over all the other alternatives that you can use in Dark Magicians. I even, a couple of years back, did 7 days of Dark Magicians where I brought you 7 different versions that you could use and abuse using Dark Magician as a core component. But for now, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share. Till next time, guys, as absolutely always, stay safe and happy dueling.